November 9th, 2021, and we're convening as the Provo City School District Board of Education. We are meeting at 280 West, 940 North at 5 p.m. We'll begin with the roll call. Melanie Hall, Board President.
Rebecca Nielsen, Board Vice President. Jennifer Partridge, Board Member.
Gina Hales, Board Member.
McKay Jensen, Board Member.
Nate Bryson, Board Member.
Terry McKay, Board Member.
Keith Patel, Superintendent.
And we'll excuse Derek Anderson. He's out of the country at the moment. So, is there a motion to convene?
I move that we convene.
All right, we are now in study session. So we'll turn the time over to Mark Wheeler, our Facilities Director, on a construction update.
Hi, everybody. As always, let me know if you have any questions. I just wanted to give you a few updates on a few different projects. Bonnie's going to help me just display a couple of visuals for you. By the way, before we start, that one thing I just wanted to share with you, we continue to experience a challenge with finding help in all areas of the Department of Facilities. Right now, just for our custodial operations alone, we have 27 postings, and that's not 27 jobs. That could be 2 or 3 postings per listing. And so we're significantly shorthanded at all locations. We have 5 locations right now, 5 campuses, where we do not have someone over 18 years old supervising a night team. And so it's a significant challenge from campus to campus. So we continue to try to shift people around as we can to try to help where we can, but there's somebody every day shorthanded somewhere. Melanie, did you have a question?
I was just going to ask, is this something that can high school students apply for these jobs?
Most of what we have in the afternoons and evenings are teenagers, high school kids, junior high kids, 16 and over. So, yeah. Anyway, we'd appreciate the help because we're looking for all kinds of help everywhere. Okay, can you go to the first slide, Bonnie? Just an update with Wasatch and with Dixon. We're working right now with the project architect they are reassembling their engineering teams because it's been a while since they were assembled. When it was tabled, they go on to other projects, so it takes us a little bit of time to get everybody back on board, everybody going in the same direction. We'll have construction management services selected by November 19th. There is a current request for proposals posted on the district website. We'll be accepting those within the next couple of weeks and reviewing those with a committee. And Tina Flui in purchasing helps us with that process. And then we'll get to you a preliminary bidding and project schedule sometime, I hope, in January, but it may be early February. It's just going to take some time to get everybody on board, especially with the construction management team. We've got to give them some time once they're selected to help us figure out some of the long-term lead items. Steel joists and decking right now, if I call tomorrow, that timeline continues to extend on major projects. So if I call tomorrow, we're 13 months out to get steel joists and decks on a project. And so it's and that's just one of the categories. Can you go to the next one, Bonnie?
So do we think it'll be Christmas? And we're not going to make it by the start of school year. Would it be Christmas that we move in?
For which project?
For Wasatch.
I don't know yet. And I don't dare say until we get that construction manager on board.
Okay. Just
so we can double check all these long lead items and make sure we don't tell you something wrong. We think Dixon most likely would be summer of 24, but I still need to confirm some details over the next 30 to 60 days with that one as well.
Summer of 24 to break ground or to open?
To open, yeah, thank you. To move in summer of 24. That's what we're trying to figure out for Dixon. And with Wasatch, there's just some other variables we've got to figure out first before I even share a date range with you. And the same process with Dixon. The architects met with our purchasing offices yesterday to review some things, to get the engineers back on board and some adjustments that way. So I'll continue to update you as we go through that process. And we'll update you in the December board meeting on who was selected, which groups were selected for which projects. There's a lot of interest. We're getting a lot of calls all over the state from construction management teams.
So why so much interest if everyone's so busy? Looks interesting.
They, in the K-12 world, they don't want to pass up an opportunity to pick up another school project. And so even though they're spread really thin, they want to pursue it. What it comes down to is when they propose, what we have to look at is who they propose as project superintendent, project manager, and project executive. Those three people are key. We have to make sure we've got the right team together. And everybody kind of knows, and that's another challenge because all the districts know who that A team is from every company. And so you all fight, everybody fights over those teams. And so anyway, they all want the projects. Yes.
Can you remind me who are the architects on the Wasatch project?
On Wasatch, FFKR Architects that's who was selected a while back, and they helped us through all the programming.
And who's Dixon?
Curtis Minor Architecture out of Pleasant Grove is the Dixon architect, and they helped us also with all the programming for Dixon. And just so you know, with those two projects as well, we're in the process of scheduling a meeting right now with the principals. And we'll include Todd McKee with the Dixon team, just to review where we're at with programming, to refresh everybody's memories. And we'll do the same thing with Wasatch. We already had a meeting with the Wasatch principal this past week. So we'll continue to do that. And then we'll also refresh memories with all the directors, just to make sure everything's still where it needs to be that way.
Mark, when you talk about programming, can you explain that for just a moment, and also talk about what has been done to this point? I know that you were dealing with two potential options for Dixon, so not a lot of two potential options for Wasatch too, so not a lot of detail has been put in there.
Yeah, thank you. So when I say programming, there's a lot of time spent with the architectural teams. They sit down with whether it's team leaders from the elementary level, but always the principal, and we also get input from the directors from each department, and they go through and say, what are you doing with this area, this area, this area, this area? The architects compile all that, and they create a programming total of square footage, classrooms, and things like that. So Wasatch, for example, one of the things we're doing first, we're adjusting back from recent conversations to the 4 classroom per grade model. So that's part of the programming. And so it's just a lot of conversation back and forth, and a lot of meetings with those at the schools that are using the facilities.
And I can add that there are some districts in this state that do not do that. You get the school we want to give you.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah. In a lot of the districts, when I call and ask a question about a certain project, they'll say, what plan number is that? And so they look at it by a plan number based on square footage in a certain model. They don't look at it by specific programming per neighborhood school. And so it is very different. We do gather a lot of input. Any other questions? Okay. Bonnie, can you go to the next one? In case anybody had any questions, what we've been doing down at Lakeview Elementary recently, if you've noticed, we now have what's called architectural metal panel on the pop-outs on the face of Lakeview Elementary. You go to the next one, Bonnie. So it's on both sides of the main entry. You can see it here again. We matched the original, what's called ACM panels on the entryway. The reason we did that, when the school was built, there were some transition points between the masonry block and steel columns, which allowed water to get into those 2 pop-out areas every time it rained. And so every time it rained, if there was any type of driving wind, driving rain, it would find its way into those classrooms or those pop-out areas. So what this did was give it a different architectural look, but it also solved a water problem. And so now we're at a point where the water won't get in those walls anymore in those classrooms. So anyway, that's what we've been working on.
That was just on the front? Just
on the front.
And it's finished?
Yeah, it's finished now. So there's still some light fixtures that need to be installed, but the main portion's finished.
Mark?
Yes.
How do that, to me, I'm not a construction person at all, but that seems like something that should have been taken care of by whoever built the school. How do we avoid this happening to the schools that we're building now?
I'm trying to figure out the nicest way to say this.
Sorry, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No, you're good. We found a lot of those things that for whatever reason were overlooked through the years. And I'll give you an example. we've tried to adjust a lot of the mechanical systems, because what was done for a lot of years, people tried to trick the systems. And so whenever I have conversations with the people, I say, look, I want the answer how we solve this. I don't want to trick the system, because tricking it just continues the problem down the road. Unfortunately with this one, this is an example, they kept trying little things that didn't really work, and we finally just had to take a step to do it the right way. But it is frustrating. At some point between design consultants, construction team, and inspectors, somebody should catch it.
Should have caught that when it was being thrown. Okay.
Yeah, they
And,
should.
and it's helpful, so if you go to Alpine, Alpine probably has 18 in that design, but depending on the geography, they haven't had any problems.
Oh, 'cause
The-
they're not
the
the
Lynn,
same.
they're not at the same spot. Here we are, flatter space, the wind hits it a certain way, it's oriented a certain way, that the wind is constant in a certain way, and we get problems and all those don't.
Okay.
Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Yep.
And I'll give a shout out to Steve Canfield as well. Steve helps me a lot with troubleshooting some of these things. He did not have that responsibility previously, and so he is very, very good at catching some of these and helping us solve it so that we can just resolve the problem. Because this was a headache for the teachers. Every time it rained, we knew water was going to get in there.
Thank
So,
you.
yeah. Can you go to the next one, Bonnie? So these are some new aerials from TimView, just a few areas I want to point out to you. This is the existing auditorium here. This is this northwest small parking lot that I've been mentioning to you for a while. They started to pave that. You can see the first strip of pavement they were just placing there day before yesterday, well, yesterday morning. And so we're close. It's paved as of last night, but we've got to stripe all the parking stalls. We also need to create the approach here so that people can drive in and out of the parking lot. And again, it'll help with about 35 parking spaces. It most likely, because of the rain today and tomorrow, it won't be ready this week. But we're hoping early next week that it'll be ready to use. And our plan is right now is to let faculty use that, shift some of the faculty out of some other areas so they can use this. And the reason we're doing that, we need cars that will be parked here most of the day. We didn't want students to park here because we can't have them in and out as much as they come and go because of other things happening. One is the bus lane, and two is just some other construction things. So that's the plan right now, is to have faculty. So that'll free up a few spots over in the existing west side parking lot over here. It'll just help with just a few more options to help with a few more cars off the streets. Yes.
So do we know, is TimView then planning to allow students in the other lot, since we now have less parking lot for them?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Or will it just be the teachers who are parking at Edgemont? Will they just shift to this spot?
It'll be a combination. The Fidel and his team are going to work with the faculty to kind of know who's going to shift and who might be using that. But we've had those conversations already, and then the admin team will work with the faculty on who goes there. And we're adding a few more visitor parking spots up here in this west side parking lot, and then they'll just be freed up for a few more student spaces there. So it's a daily. Momi can confirm this, and Todd McKee. It's a daily challenge with the parking balancing. So, any other questions on this part? Can you go to the next one, Bonnie? So again, this is here's the LDS Seminary building right here, Industrial Arts Wing right here. What I want to show you here is we have our first section of foundation walls going up on the east side. So that just happened this last week, and you'll continue to see with these aerials month by month more and more walls going up. It'll start to look like something is really happening on this academic portion. You go to the next one, and that's just another angle. They're pouring concrete now almost daily, as long as we aren't in a rainstorm. But you'll see in December a lot of these gaps will be full. You can see these cages now, rebar cages that are set up and ready for pours. So in December you'll see more photos of just more and more concrete as they continue to progress there.
Is all the helical pier work done?
What's that?
Is all the helical pier work done?
It's close. They're still doing some over in the southeast side on the way out from the Thunderdome to the football field. There's still some going on there. The majority of this is really close.
So there's all sorts of piers underneath that concrete work, right?
Correct. Yep. All kinds of vertical and
Angled.
45-degree piers, and yeah, and then they wrap those in rebar cages, and then they pour the concrete. And again, I think I mentioned this last month, but a lot of those piers, they range from anywhere from 30 to about 50 feet deep until they hit a stabilized point, and that's subgrade. Any other questions on these photos?
Will the work on the field progress throughout the winter?
On which part?
Just on all the foundation and the walls? I
Yeah.
mean, I assume if it's snowing, maybe they can't on a snow day, but...
They'll keep going.
Okay.
And so you see a line item in these projects for cold weather protection, whether it's concrete blankets or other forms of protection, that's what they keep it going. Yeah, no, nonstop. Can you go to the next slide, Bonnie?
Going back to Tim, too, really quick, one more
Yes.
question. The part between the Thunderdome and the football field area, where are we at on that part? Is that just the helical piers right now?
Yeah, so they poured their first section of concrete footings this past week. Sorry, I should have included an aerial on that, but they poured their first concrete pour, so that's progressing as well. And then as they pour, they'll catch up to where they finish the pier work. And then you'll start to see walls come up here in the next 30 to 45 days in that area. That's the section I mentioned previously that we need to have done by next August to help clean up that area and get out of the way, so it's not such a problem for everything going on there.
And what we're looking at is the new academic wing, correct?
Correct.
And then how about the top of the picture, right underneath the word high-end project? What's going on right there?
Right here?
Yes.
That is an electrical compound building.
Okay.
So there'll be a lot of major electrical components and panels that'll be in that building right there that they're just putting masonry around to put up the walls.
Okay.
Yeah.
And where will it connect again?
The building?
At the southwest part of the?
Yes. So coming this direction to the west, that's where there'll be a connection point by an entry, which will still be the bus drop-off long term. So they'll use that north entry for buses, and there'll be an awning and.
And then it connects up into the commons, right?
Correct. Yep. That's right. Yeah. Next month I'll bring I'll bring a layout just to refresh everybody's memories on what's where and what that final layout will look like. Okay, Bonnie, the last thing I wanted to share with you is just a reminder, this time of year we collect information from all the schools and departments for upcoming capital improvement projects. Todd McKee's been helping us with input from the secondary schools, which we'll use in this process. And the way this works, every year at November 30th, principals and head custodians coordinate. They submit to the Department of Facilities a list of what they would like to see happen and needs and different projects they'd like to see happen at their campuses. What we do, we take those and we have to rank those against all the other requests district-wide to rank the urgent of the most urgent. And then we also match that with our 10-year master plan to make sure we aren't putting something out of sequence. And so that's, when I present to the school board in February, that's how this process starts. We start to see those requests. We're working on it monthly all the time, but we get the specific requests from the campus by the end of November. And then we use December and January to go through and estimate and rank those projects so that by the time you see it, we've narrowed that down. Some requests we get, Timpanogos Elementary, for example, sent their request a couple weeks ago. There were a couple of things we could just jump in and help them with right now. It wasn't anything major that they needed to wait on. And so we look at that as well. If we've got somebody and we've got some budget to help them with, we'll help with a lot of the small things all the time. But this is the process that we follow. And so from November to February, and then to final approval that you see it from Joe and others in the business department in May, June, that's how that budget is developed and finalized every year. Any questions on that?
Yes. How would rest on a kindergarten playground be categorized?
How would what? Sorry.
Rest on a kindergarten playground be categorized?
So we have one of the members of our maintenance team is out inspecting playgrounds all the time. And is this a specific location?
Amelia.
It's at Amelia. So they go out and they inspect all the time. They have certain procedures they have to follow with inspections. So when we see rust, we have to look at a couple of things. one, has it rusted through? Is it something that's going to catch a finger? Is it something that can be temporarily stabilized and adjusted for to buy a little more time? If not, there's times when we have to replace a component or a part immediately, which we do on a regular basis with our playgrounds.
So how would the lighting in a teacher's parking lot be categorized?
So our electricians go around on a regular basis and they will send me reports. Some of it comes out of just normal operations budgets. We just know when we anticipate that we'll have so much per year to take care of. Other things, when it suddenly happens or if it's a little more major, we have to plan out a little bit. Is there a request you heard on the parking lot?
Yeah, the teachers at Franklin are walking to their cars in the dark.
Okay.
I've already sent in a request to the power department to check the street lights.
Okay.
But
Okay.
if that's, I know that was fixed a while ago, so
Okay,
that
thank
means
you.
the lights on the building probably aren't bright enough.
Thank you. When I finish here, I'll send a note to our electricians to check that tomorrow, and then I'll get back to you with what they find.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, we look at parking lot lighting, we look at building lighting and entryway lighting and all those things. Yeah. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mark. All right, next, to student out-of-state travel. Keith, you want to pick that?
Yeah, let me just pull it up here. We have the Tempe High School dance team, the ballroom competition team, and they would be going to California. I honestly don't recall if I have approved this before, so I'm bringing that to you for your review. All the paperwork appears to be in order. You have a copy of that. You can look it up as an attachment on board docs. So I'm recommending approval on that one. Moni is here, and
Who's the total
Who's- is our dance teacher.
Do any of you have questions for them about this?
This is a pretty typical ballroom competition that all the ballroom dancers go through.
They have a very ambitious timetable. They're leaving St. George. I've decided to read these things as carefully as Terry reads them. They're leaving St. George at 2:30, and they're going to be there at 5, at home at 5. I think that's going to be tight.
It's going to be
You know, especially in a bus. I mean, that's tough.
It has bathrooms.
And yes, there's a bathroom break, and there's girls, so they're going to use that bathroom break time. So, you know, they might be back at 5:30, 6. I don't know. Parents might want to know that. Terry, are you proud?
Very good.
Okay.
Well, it says 4:30 arrive at Tempe.
Yeah, it was tight. It was a really tight timetable.
Hours. That's not an option.
Because those buses, they're not going
No, yeah.
80,
I
what
can't
are you
get
going to
St.
go?
George in
It's
that.
80, you can go 89 and not get a ticket. And the buses aren't going to go 89.
Buses.
They're not. I took those buses as kids. They're probably the same buses, and they're not fast.
But regardless, I think it's a great opportunity for these kids. So, any other further questions for them?
Anything you want to ask?
Do you add or anything?
Pretty much it.
Yeah, I think the kids haven't traveled in a long time, and they're really excited to go out there and compete and get good comments back, and just to be able to travel, I think they'd be really happy.
And this is attached to President's Day weekend in February.
Okay.
But are they using the Monday?
No, they come back Sunday. So they're missing 2 days of school.
So they're squandering the Monday. You don't want to go to Disneyland? Like, where did the cheerleaders go up there for 5 days? 5 days. You just want to get home? You know, okay.
We do have fun time at Disney on Friday.
All right, any further questions on this out-of-state travel? All right, we'll be approving that in our business meeting. So, next, our draft diversity statement. Doug Finch.
Thank you, Board. I think some time's been allotted for a conversation around a document that I think some of you have seen. This is a part of, again, the attachments that you have. It's a draft of a document that our department, in collaboration with Human Resources, has worked on for a number of months. We feel strongly, of course, in Student Services, this is a statement of what it is that is a purpose and a vision for what we'd like to do, continuing to work with this wonderful Provo community and all of its diversity that does exist here in this unique community. And there's a nice outline of what the sense of our purposes are, everything from wanting to make sure that people feel safe and secure in our schools, that there are certain skills and abilities to engage with our community that we think are priorities, and ends with a vision statement of saying our outcomes are to develop well-rounded, confident, and engaged students. So I think that we can ask a few questions, we can answer a few questions. I have members of my department who are here. Brian Yazzie, who works specifically in diversity and equity inclusion in student services, is here, has a lot of his thought and work involved with it. So we can answer any questions as it relates if you want to get specific. But for this point, we really are hoping that the time we've got allotted here could be whether you even want to engage a little bit as a board and what are the next steps you want to take in utilizing something like this as a statement, what might be next steps we want to even take as a school district beyond this statement to continue to make some progress in this area that we know is very vital and very much on people's minds these days as well. So I'll just pause and let you either direct questions or a conversation among yourselves and just be supportive for the time we've got allotted.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
So, you know, it's been in the news lately and things like that, so it's been on my mind a lot, and I've had a lot of questions, and I'm curious, I'd love to hear, what are we doing as a district procedurally? I think there's two components here, like what do we do when a complaint comes, how do we handle something like that, and then also what are we doing to address with both faculty and with students what kind of community we want to create where we don't need to field complaints because we are being more inclusive and things like that. So I'd love to hear what are we doing so then we can decide where do we need to go from here.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you. I'd say that there's two arms of this, and I'll let Brian maybe chime in as well as other board members who've got some similar feelings or experience with this. In student services, we deal a lot with conduct concerns, code of conduct type of things, and as Nate presented in a previous board presentation, he talked a lot about what we do in terms of non-discrimination, right? And it essentially lists about any sort of a class or situation or status should be in, as saying that we don't want individuals to be on the outside looking in. In other words, discriminatory or any sort of punitive measure that we would take against individuals to not give them full access to opportunity in the school district is a violation of policy, I think 3320. I'm trying to remember. You said it enough times in that presentation. You'd think I'd have it memorized by now.
You'd think I would.
But we also, you know, about a year ago at this time, this board had the courage and the foresight to also create an inclusion measure that is, I'd say, a little more on the proactive side, saying we have a gender and equity policy. Now that's not just reactive to the idea we're just sitting back and waiting for complaints and we'll manage them when they come in, right? We also want to have this idea about looking forward and saying, are the different statuses of individuals, including gender, which has been very much something we've been trying to be sensitive to and aware of as an area of growth for us, to do some proactive things, to saying we're going to see maybe things that are embedded in even our systems, some of our policies, procedures, everything from the way we handle registration and forms to even how we manage things like preferred names and gender requests, how we might handle things such as restrooms, et cetera, that are associated with individuals who don't necessarily, you know, identify themselves as binary, as male or female in terms of gender. So that's an example of current practices that we have. I'll maybe pause there and see, Brian, if there's any additional thing besides those two things that you'd say are part of the current work, and you can even speak a little bit to how you're outreaching to those different groups to get their feel as to where they feel their barriers are.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to join you all this evening. So when I first started working here 5 years ago, I'm really, everything I've done in my career has been focused on strengthening family, focusing on connecting with families and working in partnership with parents. I spent most of my career with the Boys and Girls Club, and a lot of the success that we had
was family engagement. And so one of the things that I felt that as a district, and I felt that this community was a community that would work well with what we've done, and that's creating these advisory committees. So we created 3.5 years ago, I can't believe it's been that long, 6 advisory committees and this is kind of building off of our Title VI program, our Native American committee, that was already established here. So we created a committee for our Latino, Pacific Islander, Asian, our Black African American, and our LGBTQ. And in that time, the parents that have been attending have really helped us to see kind of a bigger picture, the cultural differences that we have in understanding their needs. Most of my work has been in the Native American community, and that's when I first started working at the National Office of Boys and Girls Club. That was one of the things that they had a hard time understanding, is how can we get our programs more functioning in our Native American communities. It's not clicking. And a lot of it was, well, we just don't understand what those needs are, because the cultural part of it doesn't get discussed. You know, we throw in, we have this master plan of how to go in and do it, and yeah, but we're still creating gaps. We have gaps that we just can't figure out how to narrow and how to solve that. And so the cultural part of it comes in, and that's what these committees have been doing. Another example, the LGBTQ. I myself, I am not a gay man. I have no idea what policies, what issues a person that's part of the LGBTQ community goes through. And so as I was sitting here in my position, I was like, you know, how can I go and develop a program or develop a policy if I have no idea the impact that it's going to make in that community? And so the feedback that we've had, you know, that was a big result of why we now have a gender policy, is because of the help from our LGBTQ committee. And at the same time, we, at Student Services, we've been understanding a lot better some of those cultural differences, the communication, that now we have, I think, more types of programs that we're doing in Student Services, and connecting better with the vast diversity that we have in our district. So, in a nutshell, I can go on and on with this, but things like that has made an impact, I think, in a very short time for our district, which leads up to this statement. I think Board Member Partridge, you asked, you know, what are some things about that we're doing now, but what we could do in the future. Having a statement kind of opens that door, that creates that pathway for us to now look at the future of this district. We all know that the demographics are changing. Things are different today, and it's going to get even more different, and change is taking place. So what do we do as a district? You know, obviously our policies, are they going to be sufficient to meet the needs for the future? Are we missing protocols? Are we missing procedures that we need to have that we don't have right now, that's going to happen if we have an issue? And unfortunately, some of our districts, our neighboring districts, are dealing with some of these issues. So having some sort of guide to create a pathway for us together, not only this group, but as a community, to work in partnership, to look at ways to strengthen our district in all capacities. Not only academics, but the social aspect, and all of these different areas that our district oversees. So, and I think it really is something that I've heard many times from our parents, that we just want our district to accept us We want this, we enjoy the district, we enjoy our kids going to our schools. But sometimes we feel like we're not accepted, or we're not part of it. And sometimes I can understand that. And so what can we do as a district to be inclusive and be welcoming? And that's, I think, kind of the foundation of this statement, is that it gives us kind of an idea of or a vision of how we could become inclusive.
Thanks, Brian. Let's just make sure that, again, help me, board president, to monitor the time you want to spend on this. And again, particularly, there's so much we could talk about with this, but specifically the things you want to accomplish and getting questions answered related to this topic. Go ahead.
Well,
Excuse me, Nick.
I remember, it was probably about a year ago, I got an email from someone and they asked this question, and I didn't know because I don't work here. So I asked Fidel, and he gave me a list. He gave me like, it was probably 3 or 4 pages of things that they were doing specifically at Tintview to help all of these people, and it kind of blew me away, all of the individual things. So there's things we can do on a district, but a lot of this is going to happen in the schools because different kids at different ages are going to have different needs. So at least for Tintview, I've been really impressed. I don't know, you probably say
So the
more
goal
about
is to set a vision and a course and let some of the developmentally appropriate and specific needs within the city respond to it based on some principle or site-based leadership.
So is that kind of information available to parents? Because I have parents ask me these questions and I don't know. But like, could a parent go in and say, show me, as maybe Momi, show me what are you doing in the schools? I don't know.
Yeah, Momi.
I'm putting you on the spot, Momi.
We do have information we provide to our counselors. It's a pamphlet. And then there are other components where parents would rather talk to us privately, and then we access the resources. I mean, it's a higher tiered sort of support to the students, but we have it in practice. Does that make sense?
So parents have some concerns, like we want to know what the school is doing. I don't know that. I should then pass them on. I guess this is a question for Alex and Todd as well. Pass them on to administration at the schools.
Absolutely. The
Okay.
schools are entertaining those conversations.
But it's safe to say that there might be pockets of different levels of greatness with this and others that maybe aren't so much up to speed on it, right? And so the goal of having a district-wide standard for this is to probably move everyone along at whatever need they have. So I love the idea that the principals are engaged in this, but we set the tone, right? With things like our gender policy, like our non-discrimination policy, like a statement like this, even our call to review what equitable practices are going on. I know a lot of you received recently an inquiry from a community member who was asking about achievement levels and discipline levels as it relates to different types of things you'd call as equity divisions within our community. And that kind of stop and reflect as a district on our performance and practices is always helpful in guiding decision making. So it's this, I think this interwoven work, Gina, between leadership and then people who are pragmatically at the school trying to implement things that matter to the community that they serve. And Tintview is a great example where they really embrace a lot of this work for sure.
So to follow up on Jennifer's question, or board member Partridge's question, and you guys referred to a policy number. Is there actual policy written down for, because in our neighboring school districts, this was one of the big things, was if there was a policy, they weren't following it. Do we have a policy, and if so, is it written down? Like, how do we handle complaints, DEI complaints?
Well, DEI complaints should be non-discrimination policy that outlines.
So based on
it outlines
race
all
or
of the different things that are protected, including all of these things we've identified, and then what is the grievance procedure.
Okay, and it is listed. How would I find that?
I'm looking it up right now.
Yeah,
Thank you. Will you send me a link?
3214.
3214.
Right.
We were in the
Well,
ballpark.
and 3320, is that what you said earlier? That one is the prohibition of bullying, harassment.
So
teasing, and
there's a
retaliation.
combination of a couple of policies we use a lot. Student services, the safe school one, the prohibition of bullying, hazing, harassment, and the non-discrimination policy. Those are really cover a lot of our dealing with conduct in student services.
Okay, thank you.
And 3300.
And what's the procedure, like if a parent has an issue with any of those? Do they just talk to the principal? Is there like an administrative?
Yeah, they give notice to a responsible adult who is an employee of the school district. And our employees are trained every year to respond to those notices they've received.
And then we have a formal system where does it go to the superintendent first, or does it go to the principal and they handle it their level?
Yeah, incrementally it starts at the school level to do some discovery and identifying how they can handle that at the lowest common denominator, the level where that offense happened. If there's a need for it to be something that exercises a little bit more oversight, or it might reach some constraints that are protected, like things like OCR with Title IX or Title VII or some of those other things that might have federal guidelines associated with it. Oftentimes myself, as the Title IX officer, as well as if it involves an employee, then it would involve Jason Cox as being another Title IX officer for employee matters. We would immediately get involved with some of the serious allegations that might be in place.
I mean, we might want to think about any complaint filed under one of those to be referenced to you, just because they're so sensitive and involved with the community that there probably should be some kind of oversight or escalation.
I appreciate that, Nate. For an example of that is any time that we make a referral to the Division of Child and Family Services, there's a referral form that's kept, and I read every one of those. They're sent to my office. If there's a suspecting neglect or abuse of a child, there is a form process that makes it to my desk for review and filing. So
that way we can be mad at you when things go. When we have a Davis situation.
I knew that's where that was going. Yeah, exactly, Nate. Thank you.
Yeah, because I don't want it to go out be on me.
No. That's what I'm sure my job is, right?
We usually don't get complaints about the policies.
Right.
We usually get complaints about whether people are following our policies.
Yeah.
And so I would suggest you look at policy and procedures 7315, 7315. And that's complaints regarding staff or programs.
Okay.
And that's usually where people will start on this process.
And I'll say that's feedback I've gotten, is that they'll tell administrators or whomever at the school, and then it doesn't go anywhere. And so that's one of the things. So like, I don't want to micromanage anyone, but I would be wondering what makes it past. You know, like, do they have to write all this down so that we could say if there's, because that's one of the problems with Davis. The parents were documenting the heck out of it, and the school wasn't. The district wasn't. And so I want to make sure that we have something in place.
I'm not going to say that we're flawless on this one, but I will tell you that the main reason why people won't hear about what was the result of my complaint is because if it's a personnel matter, we do not talk publicly about personnel actions that are taken. We just don't. But we can report appropriate follow-up was taken, a meeting was held with the employee, or we've turned it over to HR, or any number of things we can say. And that's what we generally do.
And there is a paper trail that not everybody can access, but that you could access.
We will have that access. We get occasional complaints about this individual or that individual. In some cases, we have to hire someone to do a formal investigation, someone who is not associated with the district, so that it has more of an air of objectivity.
Thank you.
Yeah, there's certainly area to grow and to continue to retrain people on these things. So what's happened in Davis is certainly, informative to all of us who are watching and seeing how could we improve. So, like I said, let's continue to address with whatever time you want to put toward this subject. And the idea, plus the idea of, again, going back to the inclusion statement of how you feel like you want to take any action or next steps or ask questions of us. Go ahead.
Well, I just thought I would add a little bit of district history as well everybody's aware of the Davis situation where this was a complaint that the complaints went to the district, and then a complaint also went to the Office of Civil Rights. This has also happened in our district. The Office of Civil Rights comes in and they do extensive investigation, and that's where the parents saying, I need stories, and they had been collecting stories for a long time. Office of Civil Rights also validated those stories. We have also had complaints even fairly recently, or go to the Office of Civil Rights and come back to us, and it has not been the same situation. I think often because of our administration's willingness to ask somebody outside, can you come in here, can you look at this, can you help us, and that has gone a long way, but those investigations are very long. That's why from the sort of initial incident in Davis to 2 years now, and always that's a Office of Civil Rights gives a notice to the board, to the superintendent, we're looking into this, we know that's happening, but our district has fared fairly well through that process over a couple of different investigations.
Thank you, okay. Appreciate
I
that
have
context.
Did students have the opportunity to have input on this statement, the diversity statement?
In the draft form that it's in, I think that this has just been, as again, I identified to you, it's been identified as something as a current draft based on some of our professionals. That could be some great suggestions about moving forward as it continues to be refined, and particularly if we're going to have something that's whatever that we decide to do with this. Is it going to be visible for people to see and view? Is it something that we'd want to have in student-friendly language? This is probably not extremely accessible to younger kids to read and understand some of those terms. So the answer is not yet.
Okay.
And I like how we had equity and equal opportunity both in the same thing, so then both sides
They'll
of
be
the
upset,
argument,
right?
they'll be happy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Again, the words that you use anymore in these statements, in themselves, you take pause and want to make sure that they hopefully represent what you want them to represent, because that's even a moving target these days. Any, again, additional questions or dialogue you want to have with each
I
other?
appreciate the time on this,
No,
Thank
I
you.
got, no,
Thank you.
we've got plenty of time to
Okay.
discuss it.
So we go along with what you were just saying, Doug, and this is a question I've asked Brian, and I think this is a question we all need to have, which is, how do we plan to utilize this? It's nice that we have the statement. I think that this is great. What do we plan to do with this? Does it go on the website when something happens? Is this a statement we put out? So that's my question: is what do we plan to do with
I
it?
think when we get to the point where the board approves it in its final form, I think number one, we probably have to recognize that it may need to be adjusted over time. But once the board has approved it, then I think we need to find a way to make it live. Not just post it on a website, but to do training on it and to make sure that this is a value that we demonstrate, whether it's in a PTA meeting or whether it's in a faculty meeting or whatever. But we just have to bring it to life. That's my opinion. There may be others in the room.
And are there specific, what Gina's asking is, are there specific plans to do that? I mean, like where you say training?
As of right now,
We're still working on the statement, and so that's the first step. So would a second step then be, from here, we're going to refine, we're going to edit, whatever, and then we'll approve, and then from there we'll...
We're kind of seeking your direction.
Okay.
This has taken a significant amount of effort, and we've kind of been trying to find the right time to have this conversation. So thanks for making the space today. We're looking for visionary direction from each of you, or as a group, to say this is what we see as being some next things we'd like to have happen in the community that you all represent, because we're hoping this is representative of the philosophy and the feeling we have about engaging the community you've all been elected by. So, Rebecca, I'd love to hear a little bit about how your thoughts are, the board members' thoughts are, and we'll take your direction about next steps.
Yeah, keep going.
Well, I would guess, it seems like a fabulous start. How long have you spent on it? Quick question.
Brian, and speak to...
Yeah, it took several months. Because we wanted, Elizabeth Hanson and I worked on this together. And we went back and forth on it because we wanted to make sure that it represented everyone. I think DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, I think race just overlaps everything. I think everybody focuses everything on race, but we're forgetting disabilities. We're forgetting low income. We're forgetting all these other groups that are part of diversity, equity, inclusion work. And so that's why we wanted to include all of that. But we also wanted to talk about how important it is as a community working together, because this affects everybody. It's not, all about one group, or this is everybody. And so that's what this is all about. And so, the wording, we were very selective in how we worded it. But again, we also wanted the statement to fit the culture of Provo. And so that was kind of the background of this. But yeah, it took several months to do this.
Great. and it sounds like it was a lot of work, so we appreciate it. Most of the time when policies come to us in draft form, they've already been edited and all of that, and so typically we just say we like it and we approve it or not. So where it's still draft form, how do we go about editing from here?
We're not approving this tonight.
Right. So but that's what I'm saying is normally when they come to us, they're ready for approval, but we're getting an early look. So
And this
so
isn't
how
a policy either.
No.
This is
This is
a statement from all of you. So
Got it.
we're kind of working on developing language you would like to represent to your constituents.
Okay.
So Jennifer.
Well, to that end, or that point, I guess even though I knew it was a statement, in my head I kept thinking it was going to go up on our policy. And I'm wondering if we could adapt it so either it is a policy or we have a statement that we can use when things come up in the media and we want to make sure everybody knows where we stand on an issue.
Right?
And that also have a policy, something I'd love to see with some of our policies. I know we're going to go through a process to review them, but a lot of our policies right now are about, well, what are the consequences if someone doesn't follow what we want to see? But I would love to have our policies first outline what do we want to see. We want to see diversity, equity, inclusion, and the way we take care of each other. Instead of just the anti-bullying, we want to see the ways we treat each other, right? And so I would love to see some, I don't know if we want both or what you guys think would be best, but I would love to see some of this adapted into a policy.
Yeah, I love that. That's some great suggestions. And certainly there's good language there that could certainly drive a lot of policy, a number of policies, of saying this is our statement about what our values are. Now let's create policies and procedures that support its implementation, right? Great comments. Other thoughts? We're all ears, really.
If you want to make it living, we're loading up on all these trainings that even board members get, that these are required annual training or blood pathogen training. It would be great if this was included with those 5 multiple choice questions that you so that everyone understands this is the district's expectation.
Like that. So let's make a note of possibly having a Safe Schools annual refresher training kind of thing. Be part of the culture of expectations is what we do here.
And also part of the procedure that on any complaint that any of our the part of the procedure in handling a complaint is reviewing our expectation. Now let's talk about a complaint.
This should overlay all those other policies that were visited about, right? In theory, right? The 3214s, the 75s. In other words, we wouldn't want to have incongruence between our value statement and then the way we implement the policies later, right? So
actually, Doug, I was going to go kind of the same direction, just saying that it may not apply to every single policy that we bring in, but I think this needs to be a filter through which we look at and see all of the policies that we review and approve.
Yeah, that's certainly what we've heard a lot of from these groups that Brian's talking about. It's the systemic things that they're concerned about. It's not that people aren't being kind and not looking for ways to celebrate and maybe see them more. It's when they come across something that says, I don't know if you know the biases that's here. And that's the subtlety of the feedback that I've been in some of Brian's committee meetings before. They've said, you just don't know when we go to interact with the school district in this way, it just has inherently built into it something that's just not really well, suited for our situation. And so it does guide and it should inform implementation of so many other policies and procedures if we were to, again, adopt such a statement.
So I have a quick thought. Where we're talking about using it to inform things or whatever. Maybe as a board we may want to think about adding something like this into our 5th board goal, which is currently teamwork, professional conduct, and civility. It feels like that something like this could easily be added and integrated into that goal, perhaps, if we really want our board to not just make the statement, but kind of cement it a little further, is add it somewhere into our board goals. But another thing to think about if we want to inform everything that happens in the district as well, like you're saying, add it into school improvement plans or the board, the school district mission statement, or there's places we can add it, not just policy that helps overall failing of the district, in the district, I think.
You know, school improvement plans, we do have a section for serving underserved populations,
Okay.
but it may be too vague as we're going to be attempting to reference for this kind of specific document.
I think there's a lot of document type things we can try to be more specific with and adding these, you know, DEI type statements, so.
Any other comments?
I would say overall in the statement, I got a little lost in it, and I know so much work went into it, and so I hate to say
No.
that I feel like we need to just like refine it a little bit.
Oh,
I think
for
there's
sure.
really good points here,
Yeah.
but and I do see a little bit of what I've heard called before education-y, like how educators speak is not as friendly to how other people are going to read it. So I think if we can just look at that a little bit and maybe just make it a little more
Civilian.
and maybe not as flowery.
Sure.
I don't, as you can tell from my
Yeah.
comment right now, I'm not good at being brief. But if we could make it a little more to the point.
No,
You're not gonna hurt my feelings.
No. Thank you. That's wonderful feedback.
Yes.
That's what we're asking for, right there, and finding the right, probably again, like Terry mentioned earlier, a student voice in there, a parent voice, community voices. Because if this is only accessible to us, then it still hasn't met the goal of reaching out to our community. We're talking a lot lately about reaching out and building connections with and trust with our community again. This should help us, I'd hope. It shouldn't rather than hinder this idea of language they don't feel is accessible to them. So
I'd
that's-
love to see this go to the parent advisory. Not that they need to say what needs to go into it, but just to kind of get their feedback.
Bless
And
you.
then I want to make sure that Brian's got the backup that he needs, because I think his partner in this may need a new partner. I feel like I'm. Never mind.
You're not letting the cat out.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, we'll make sure he's got good support.
Okay.
So that our staff can respond to any sort of need to put some additional people there.
Okay.
No, thank you, Gina. Thanks for the advocation for this, really. I think I know you as a board, having worked with you closely for the past 4 or 5 years, to know this speaks to your heart and your desires to serve everybody. And I love, if there's one word in here that you say, what got the underline? There's one word in here, it's the word you'll find in there, it's all. And I know that you feel like you represent all the constituents in your community. And I've seen you again and again act in such a way. So we want this to be reflective of that, but we know we can refine it. And we want to do things in a way that you're comfortable with. But thank you for giving us space and time. Go ahead.
In terms of timeline, I'd like to suggest that maybe we don't pursue approval of this until after the USBA conference. There may be some things that come up in the conference that would be relevant to this, and may inform it a little bit and make you feel a little better or different about it. So I would encourage you to live with it for a little while, look at it, study it, and if you have specifically, as you dive into it a little bit more, if you read a section of it, say, okay, I'm not sure what the basis of this was, fire off a question. You can send it to Brian, you can send it to me, and one way or another we'll get you an answer.
Thank you for working on this.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you for your input. We really were asking for it, and we just, again, as you even reflect after this meeting, feel welcome to contact us. We really do want this to be a work we engage in. Thank you for creating the space for this. I know that topics like this sometimes are challenging to talk about at different times and seasons, but thank you again. I really, I'm grateful for the opportunity to work for a board who values this kind of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Doug. Thank you, Brian. All right, next, Provo High School fee schedule adjustment. Keith, do you want to talk about that?
Actually, I'm going to probably defer to Devin on this one.
This is the second time the fee has come to you. It has come to the board twice before it can be added to the fee schedule. It's for the Performing Arts Tour that all the performing arts groups at Provo High are doing to New York City in the spring. So the total fee is $1,500, and that will be assessed as a performing arts fee rather than breaking it out among each of the individual programs.
Do you guys have any further questions on this? This is the second time we're seeing it. Okay.
We have to approve this.
Yeah, we'll approve it in our business meeting today.
Okay. Cheerleading fee, right, too?
That was last one.
Yeah,
That was last one. Yeah,
that
this
was the second one
This
was
is
last
the second one. Yeah. Okay. Next, we're going to talk about school community council board member assignments.
Point of information.
Yes.
I move that this agenda item be postponed until more information is added to board docs, so we are better prepared as a board and the taxpayers have time to review it as well.
I'm not understanding what.
There's nothing on board docs explaining what this agenda item is.
Well,
It's
can I
like-
explain it now?
No,
And then-
that's my point. There's nothing on board docs to explain what this agenda item is. So my motion is to postpone it until December so that you can add things on board docs.
This is a study session, so a vote is not appropriate.
Yeah.
Well, I looked it up on Robert's Rules of Order.
But it's a study session, so.
We don't always have an attachment for every.
Everything.
It's just a
That's my point.
This is a chance for us to discuss this.
This is my
not to
point.
take any action, but to engage in a conversation about action we might want to take in the future.
But there's
to
nothing
start.
on board docs to explain this.
But there will be things in the minutes to grade further, so no action is going to be taken today. It's just to talk about, and so that we can take action in the
But
future.
there's nothing in board docs to explain what it is.
I think that's what
But
Melanie
that's
was
what I was
just
going to
about
discuss, and then we can make
No,
further action later.
There's nothing here to explain anything about it.
Well, I'm going to move forward with this.
So you're
unless-
just going to ignore my motion?
Well, is there someone that wants to second it? Well, I don't think we're taking a vote in. We don't take ever votes inside study session unless we're moving to an executive session.
I would like to hear what we were gonna talk about, 'cause I would
So
like that
no one's
clarification.
going to second?
So, I don't know if you can second it, right, because we're in a
We're in a
session?
study session, so.
But I think the concern is, there's been items on the agenda that,
A blank.
that are blank, and then when we get to it, I've got
And I'm
smacked
gonna,
in the
I'm
face
gonna
a
get
couple
to
times.
that part
And we're
in J.
surprised about it.
Yeah, and I'm gonna talk about that part in J in just a minute.
So from now on, there needs to be something here.
Okay.
Or I'm going to continue to do this point of information every single time.
Okay. So what I wanted to bring up was with the community council, each of us are over certain schools, right, in our certain districts based on our regional areas of where we live. What I would like to do is offer opportunities for other board members to be part of the community council, to go. We're not a voting, as a board member, we do not have a vote at community council, but we have an opportunity to go and be part of other schools and be part of that community council if you would like. So that's what I'm suggesting here as a board, that like at Provo High School, if we would like to have 2 board members represent on the community council, that they go. Or if one can't go, the other person could go. Or they can both show up at the same time.
So in past practice of the board, it was a way to sort of go outside of your district, because we do represent, by statute we're elected by a district, but by statute we are to represent the interest of the entire district. And so having sort of a discussion about what should go into those decisions or assignments or requests, we just take requests and see how that works out. How do you think those, is that a good practice, so that it's helpful to have assignments, because when the principals, so the head of the community council, so the president of the community council knows who to email and remind, versus, I mean, all of us can look on the school website where the community council information is posted, but if we want a criteria on how those assignments are made, or if there are preferences, how should we make those assignments, I guess would be, because it's a process that has been sort of regimentedly done in the past, and then sort of, well, we'll just see who volunteers, and it's gotten informal again, to should we make it a little more formal, is the discussion. would be, you know, if we're gonna talk about community council.
And this probably won't be the last time that this comes up, because we do have some imbalances. Some individuals have 4 schools, some individuals have 1 or 2 schools. And so, and that might not be inappropriate if one of those schools for those with smaller assignments is a high school. The demands of a high school might be greater than the demands of an elementary. That doesn't necessarily mean that they are. It's kind of contextual. So I think we want to revisit this at some point in the future anyway. While McKay has been on USB leadership, we've kind of, and when I say we, I don't mean me, I mean the board, has been thoughtful about lightening his load, because he spends most of the winter months up in Salt Lake at the legislature. When he's no longer doing that function, then perhaps we can expand his role to more than just 1 school. So those are the kinds of things.
So
we can
I'm
talk
not
about.
taking anybody off of any community council. So like Terry, you would still be over the schools you're already over. Gina, you're over the same ones. Jennifer's exactly. So all I'm saying is that if I wanted to have an opportunity to go learn more about the West Side schools, I could be assigned to maybe a West Side school like Amelia.
So they would be official assignments? that
Yeah,
we
they,
do.
and how, is there a
But we
good
can't
way
vote.
to-
I mean, basically,
I mean,
you
you
No,
can't
no,
vote
but
anyway.
we-
Yeah, I mean,
It's kind of like when we do our committee in January, we can make assignments or something like that. But the official board member will be the person in that district, but if this is an opportunity for us to get to know the entire district a little bit better.
But if you think the 3 you go to already is sufficient for your needs, then you're probably good.
This is why I'm having this discussion.
Clarifying question, so, you know, even though our secondary schools are assigned to a certain board member, the rest of the board members on that half of town feed into it. So if they want to also attend, you're saying that could also be an
And you
option.
can already attend, right?
Yes,
you
you
can
can
go whenever
attend,
you want.
but
Okay,
if we
could
want to
they-
make it
But
more
this would be
formal,
official.
if we want to make it more formal, this is what I'm proposing. I'm bringing
So
up.
I just want to comment really quick. When I first came on the board, I remember hearing a lot and being encouraged to go attend community councils on the other side of town, so you can be exposed to other schools and whatever. And I remember thinking, okay, I'll totally do it. And then I realized I can't go to like 17 community councils every month. Like, there's no way that's going to happen. And so for me, it's never really happened because I don't know which ones to go to, and so. The idea of a formal assignment just makes it a little bit easier for me to know I have my schools that I'm over, but then I'm also going to just go and check in on Rock Canyon here and there and make sure, get some exposure to a different kind of school, I don't know, something like that.
or even get the minutes.
Right.
TSSA money is expanding every year. This is
Mhm.
another thing that gets.
And honestly, stuff like that, like minutes and seeing other school plans is actually really helpful when I'm reviewing my school plans, see what other people are doing, how they compare. Because I only ever really see Westridge and Lakeview every year, right? And so, but looking at other plans could be helpful. So.
It also gives you, sort of, I think that sometimes we're not a principal's boss. But they understand where their boss is boss, and so there's some nervousness in there, and sometimes having just a reason to be at the school to ask questions. No, I really get to be here, and I really get to be in this meeting. This is an appropriate meeting for a school board member. I think sometimes that can help. It's a shorthand. If they're a new principal and they just want to do something, I think there's some value to doing that. But it's a question of, it's been informal. Should it stay informal,
Right.
or should we say, hey, why don't we just divide this up? It came up originally. The practice came up originally because community councils weren't a thing. They were a thing, and one board member started going to all of them, and nobody went to any of them else. And so everybody went, and she would bring information, and we would go, oh, we're unprepared. And so why don't we divide these up so that we can see the issues of the school, because this is another location. So how to go about that? is.
So there's, two more things I want to say.
Yeah.
One is, like, based on my work schedule, there's times where I can't even go to my own schools that I represent because they meet when I'm at work. And I can't continually take time off of work as much as I would love to. I can't do that. So having someone else assigned to my same school as me, as like even as almost like a backup, would actually be helpful for me too. And the other thing is just how I was thinking, as we're discussing this, we're kind of lucky enough to be on a board in a district that we can attend the community councils of our assigned schools. If we're like on an Alpine board, we have 52 elementary schools in our one area, and that's never happening. So it's kind of cool that we actually can do this, and so I like the idea, personally.
I would also add that if you do assign 2 board members to it, maybe Rebecca, you and I would just work through how you want to be able to get that feedback to those councils when the time comes regarding their school plans. Otherwise, I think just be aware that every board member is welcome at every community council meeting, and they're posted on their website. And in fact, the principals are very much aware that you are welcome at any one of those meetings. But if you come unannounced, sometimes they may just be a little bit surprised. To McKay's point, they like to kind of know what's going on and why you're there and if there's a concern or an issue. But being in those discussions genuinely helps you know kind of the issues or concerns that the school board or the school community councils are trying to address. A lot of the elementaries really centers around, say, walking routes, and Terry's been a huge part of that with Franklin and Amelia and a few others. And that's where just knowing what's going on helps all of you be better informed when especially giving feedback to schools about their trust lands plans.
So I've actually been reading the minutes of other boards throughout the state, and it's interesting to see how a little tiny school district, all 5 school board members are assigned to all of the community councils, because maybe they only have 3 schools. But then, what Rebecca says, in the big school districts like Alpine and Jordan, 1 school board member is assigned to a cluster, and that's like 20 to 30 schools, and you can't even go to your own. So it's hard for them to get to know individual schools. So, being a middle of the road school district, and
In size only, quality.
size, yeah, in size, how number of schools we have, at least we can cover the schools that we can cover. And so having backups is a good idea. If someone needs that, feels like they need to have a backup, please speak up. Or maybe just the high schools, maybe they want extra help.
Well,
you can also ask
I'm thinking even with high schools, there's 3 board members, but all of your constituents feed into all of Provo High School. There's 4 of us, but all of our constituents feed into, 2 different schools. So it's good for all of us, not just Nate and now Rebecca, to just be the only ones at those community councils, and I shouldn't be the only one at Centennial, and vice versa. This just gives us a good chance to look and really see what's going on at all these schools.
So I really enjoy attending the SCCs. I get to meet parents, and I get to see what the issues are, and they ask me questions, and it's great. I have 3 schools. I had 4 previously. Now I've got 3. If I need to attend more, I might explode. I'm trying to do everything.
Yeah, me too.
And so and not that I'm opposed to helping out. Like if someone needs me to go, I'm happy to go. But if you give me an assignment, I am the type of personality I will feel I have to do it. And I have to be there or I'm failing. So I'm not opposed to assigning.
This is why we're having this conversation.
Okay. And I'm not opposed to assigning them necessarily. I just my head starts to swim.
I guarantee that I won't go to any more that I
So to Alex's point, I think that Alex does a great job in making sure that we know that we're welcome at any school, and we don't want to interrupt, and we don't want to disrupt in a certain way. But sometimes it's nice to get that email reminder and then look at, the minutes came, or that just even that context we are board members, we're non-voting, nobody will take attendance, nobody will say you didn't go enough, nobody will say, even on your assigned ones, Alex never goes, you didn't go to enough community, you didn't voice that opinion. It's an opportunity for us to know, I guess, to know the district. And I think that some of those concerns of why it's become informal, and it's just a question of do we want to have the opportunity to touch base in a few different ways and know some of the conversations that are going on in other neighborhoods.
Are we expected to attend every community council meeting for every?
No.
From my
No.
understanding, it was just
No.
to come.
Yeah.
When
you're
available.
You're kind of the connection piece to the community, and the council really does need to know who you are, just so that there are conversations that continually you develop through that relationship. The one thing I would just say caution on is if like Nate, McKay, and Gina all show up at Timpview for one of those community council meetings, that's a powerhouse meeting, all of a sudden it's like Fidel might be going, okay, what's wrong, or what did I do? So giving you the heads up might be a little bit of a, hey, I'm thinking of coming, just wanted you to be aware.
Fidel would like the glory.
What's that?
He'd like the
He'd like the glory.
Don't worry about Fidel, he'll be fine. We all showed up. He loved the crowd.
Well, I mean, case in point, the three of us showed up to Dixon just last week, and that, I don't think we were trying to overwhelm John, but I actually go to Dixon as a parent and not as a board member.
Somebody sent me an email, so I showed up.
Yeah, well, because I am a Dixon parent, right? And so I actually go and vote at Dixon meetings, and we looked it up, I can, as a parent. Anyway, so I go as a parent, but then it turns out that all three of us go, and then there was one parent there in attendance and one on the computer. So then it just ends up, almost feels like, I don't know, like we overwhelmed him or the meeting, but I mean, not that it was a bad thing. It was just funny to me that it was like a board member, like, meeting almost, Anyways, I don't know. And it's not bad. It was just kind of funny circumstances.
Let me give you
But
just...
our secondary schools, though, we all three feed into it, so it's not...
Yeah.
Let me give you just an example. So when this first started, and I went to Sunset View, so I was assigned to Sunset View Elementary, and that was probably the only reason I went, because I got assigned, and somebody's going to all of these. Maybe I should just go to maybe one. I got assigned, so I got to Sunset View, and community council was all faculty, the principal, and 2 parents, versus Wasatch and the Paz mom, that there would be 70 people on the community council if they let it. And so there was this difference, and then they started talking about achievement not achievement, but the evaluation of kindergartners, and the number of students who came to kindergarten at Sunset View who only knew 4 colors, who only knew 7 or fewer letters. And that was vastly different than my elementary. And I wanted to go back, not because I thought I was contributing, because I thought I was learning a lot more about the district. And so then when I was assigned to Dixon, I didn't go to everyone. I probably went to 2 or 2.5 a year when I was assigned. The same with Lakeview. But that was... And that's been really valuable, even in advocating at Wasatch, when I reminded Wasatch, hey, your new building is going to cost enough that the other side of town actually pays for this. Do you understand that the other side? And these are their struggles. Do you understand that they have to pay for it, and it's not enough just to sort of advocate narrowly, but it's the value to the whole district. And so just those experiences of not, but feeling, and yeah, busy, and go, but it was a reminder, this is an opportunity, I'll go once, but then I wanted to go again. And it was just helpful, and I don't know if I would have done that in the same way without.
I know with community council there's more responsibilities, Alex, and deadlines. Knowing what the deadlines are for all the things that they have, like paperwork they have to turn in and stuff, that would be kind of nice to know what all those deadlines are.
You took the words out of my mouth. I was going to tell you that in the December study session, Alex will do some training on school community councils for the board.
Okay.
And I'll add to that, if you get the deadlines straight and can keep track of them, you're hired.
I know. Well, there's, not only are there a million, but they overlap
They
year by
overlap
year.
and-
And there's
So
sometimes
just-
3 active plans at
Okay.
once.
And this is the one thing, we'll do the training next month, and we'll talk a little bit more about it. But recognize that you have 2 active plans that are always overlapping, and those deadlines become a little bit confusing and hard. And usually my assistant is the one that tries to make sure that the community council chair and the president stay on top of it. And to your point, it's a little confusing. We do our best, but it is an ongoing process.
Yeah, and so does Independence have one as well?
Yes.
Yes.
And is there any other programs like adult ed or anything that, do they have community council?
E-school
Do they,
has one.
E-school?
E-school, at the state hospital, they don't have that one here.
So Slate Canyon and State Hospital don't have one specifically because it is designed to be for people that are constantly there.
Yes.
And those 2 locations, people are constantly moving in and out. To be able to get a parent committee that's consistent is almost impossible there. It is impossible. And so we really can't make that work. And so those are the 2 places where we don't have a community council. Even with e-school, it really does become a struggle to get a solid council that will stay consistent throughout a year. In fact, I haven't had one yet so far for e-school that's been consistent. We've always had to pull people and try to replace it. It's really messy.
Do they still get trust fund money?
Yes, they do.
They met today. And I recruited a good one for e-school this year. She went to the
Thank
council
you.
today.
Thank you.
Yeah, and that's a good thing too, is like know your neighbors that you can recruit to be on community councils as well. I don't think there's a lot of parents that understand what it is. So what I want to do is with time, I think we should revisit this in December. Think about it. Do we want to go informal or formal? And go forward with this. I just wanted to present this as an option to you guys today. So
So when you say formal or informal, you're talking
meaning
assignments or no
assignments or no assignments, or just an open invitation that everybody's going, with the caveat that we would inform that principal that I'm planning on attending, so that they're not, surprised when we show up. So.
Canyon Crest plans theirs when we do this meeting, so I think they do that on purpose.
They've worked around your schedule.
Well, it's at 4 o'clock.
When is Nate unavailable?
Yeah.
Let's do it then.
So obviously I'm not bringing anything to that.
So are you okay if we bring this up again in the future meeting, just to decide kind of where we want to go with that? Just think it over. So, okay, thank you. That's what I was bringing up for this. Capacity for an open enrollment, Doug?
Thank you. We've been talking a lot about enrollment, so hopefully this doesn't need to be a long conversation. Even the spreadsheet that's as part of the board doc, it had some updating. I tried to work with my staff to make it so that the descriptions for each of the columns wasn't, back to that word, education needs, that was hard for the average person to understand. I still didn't define, Terry, what an FTE was, so hopefully that's in the minutes somewhere if someone wants to look that up. But I'm hoping that this array here of how we determine capacity for schools, Mark's department is helpful in us looking at what the general teaching stations and functional capacity of the buildings are. His department really helps us with that. The principals help us identify moving across this from the light yellow to the kind of more orangish color in the middle. This one is teaching stations as determined by the principal. The principals communicate with us where they have how many classrooms could be utilized for instruction, and then you'll note that they take out from that spaces that are maybe used for special education or art rooms or music rooms, where especially schools, especially classes in elementary, they don't have a normal grade level that meets there, right? So that actual, what we call our maximum capacity, we use that in that second section for determining early open enrollment threshold. And that's what we're coming up against. This is a November conversation we'll have with you every year, just saying today's conversation is about what is the capacity of our buildings and what do we anticipate for enrollment. Okay. The next section there, that's the darker goldenrod color, is the section that's kind of determined later in the spring when FTEs, or full-time equivalent contracts, are given to principals to hire teachers, and then we use the formula of class size, as it's noted there in the numbers, to determine what their capacity is. We call that adjusted capacity based on the FTEs they were allocated each spring. So those numbers then lend themselves over to what you see now as kind of the blue, not the blue, excuse me, pink area, and that is for currently We have late enrollment that's open pretty much all year long for the current school year. You can see there the number of seats still available in that first column, and then the second column says, is that school then open or closed for open enrollment right now? And you'll see little asterisk signs out there. We try to make this much more functional for the average person to see and understand what does it mean if they're at their threshold in any means for, again, the pink would be based on adjusted capacity on the teacher contracts that were given. Today's meeting, though, moving past all that, is for that last kind of tan-colored section of this report where it says, we're now looking ahead to the 2022-2023 school year. What do we have as projected move-up numbers for each of our buildings? You'll find that in the kind of the green numbers that are there in the column before it. And then here we look at back to the idea of take that against what the capacity of the building is allocated by our facilities and our principals, saying classroom spaces that could be utilized if they could have all the teacher contracts they could possibly need, right? We'd only just put here anywhere where you see a negative number, there would be a concern that that building is at capacity for what it was designed for. Now again, understand that capacity has a 90% threshold. It takes the idea of putting the classes full every class period, but then takes a 90% versus 100% of that number to allow for move-ins, as well as, and Todd would be the first to say, secondaries work on an efficiency model of having prep periods so that every class period, every classroom isn't full because some teachers are on prep. So there's some kind of sliding scale of what that actual every classroom filled with kids all day long would be for a secondary school, right? So we note this as being something for your awareness. This isn't a voted item as much as that you represent all these schools and communities, and school open enrollment choice for parents to determine where they want to attend is a significant concern for them. And so you can see as we go to the December 1, opening up early enrollment for the next school year, our general stance as a school district, for reasons we've talked about in the past, is to be open. We'd like to invite people to come be part of our school district. Numbers are our friends when it comes to enrollment, right? That's the lifeblood of the school district. It's the way we get our WPU from the state, and so as much as we're able to be hospitable to having students come, we want to do it. Even as you'll note, the one school with a negative number there at the bottom, Timpview High School, has been probably in this situation for a number of years where they are really tight for enrollment. That 230 students, if you go all the way back, you'll say, well, the functional capacity to be able to handle that, but by the time you take working stations, et cetera, it does leave a certain number of students who are beyond that 90% of capacity. But maybe Todd, you could affirm this. I visited with his school administration earlier this week and last week, and they still want to take the position of being open as a school and working with us in student services if they have tight programs or a certain grade level that they run out of room for one reason or another, whether it be in their master schedule or so forth, that they could maybe close down certain parts of their school in a fair and equitable way, but they don't want to have their school just off the radar as not a school that's open for open enrollment. Does that represent what you understand too, Tom?
Exactly. I think that's the general theme amongst all the secondaries. They'd like to be open. It sends a positive message to the community, who they are and who they're trying to represent. And the challenge is obviously with Timpview, they're beyond their capacity, and on top of that you couple in the construction issues that they're facing. It's becoming a real management situation.
We need our football players. So it has to be open.
That was my question. How many of these are athletes coming from out of the district?
Try not to say that. Is that something we don't say in these meetings?
For applications, that if you're 6'5" and jump 35 inches, around a 4.40.
None of that's going in the minutes, I hope, because we do not ask that question. We don't ask that question. Right?
They all live at their cousin's house.
Okay. Well, as we say in student services, everyone's got a grandma in Provo.
Yes.
Okay, so let me self-report in the third to last column that we have one typo there of the number of applications. Back to your point, Gina, how many applications have each of the schools received this year as of this month? I've reported those with the ideas of how many were allowed, and then how many. That last column is how many left that school, right? We've been talking a little bit in the past about the fluctuation that happens with our enrollment based on choice, right? This is all in district stuff. If you'll note the number we have down for Franklin, Franklin didn't receive 365
was gonna say
Oh,
that doubles their
applications.
Geez, I was
enrollment
wondering what was going on.
Yeah,
I saw that.
Word got out, yeah, that they have a really great lunch there and a really great principal. No, the 6 is an error. It's 35
Okay.
versus 365. That was just
I
picked
was
up
curious about
just
that.
walking into this meeting.
Okay.
That's an error, and we'll correct that before we publish this on our student services webpage.
So when someone choices into a different school,
Mm-hmm.
then the next school year, do they have to reapply? Are they part of the numbers every year, or are they in for the rest of their?
Matriculate all the way through
Okay.
through the high school, unless we take action with prior notice of like March 1st to say that next level that they're going into is overfilled. We can go to a last person admitted and notify those individuals by March 1st of the spring before the next year to notify them they need to return to their area of residency. We rarely do that, but that is part of procedure. But once they're in, they don't need to apply when they move to the next grade
So-
or the next school in that feeder program.
So generally, if they're in, and then we say, well, for next year, this elementary school, we're going to deem this one closed, because they were already in, they don't have to worry about it, they're still in.
The only way we would do that, like I said, was
Is
if we
if
had to
you
go back
would-
and say,
yeah.
we've got a concern here, we need to run statistics on who are the last ones admitted through school choice and identify what number of students we need to give notice to by March 1st that the following year they need to return back to school. But I don't know that in my time in student service we've exercised that part of the policy.
Piggybacking on her question, if an older child gets into the siblings automatically get it?
They don't automatically get in, no. I mean, it certainly is something that...
It's a criteria.
Yeah, it certainly lends to this idea of why we'd take a hard look at, for instance, if it looks like, as you can see, even what you see in the blue, I mean, I keep calling it blue, the pink here. This status currently, you'll see some that say open, closed, right? And they have little symbols out to the side of it. We occasionally have to close a program because of the idea that we're at prevalence for the number of IEPs that school is trying to maintain at one time. So that's a criteria we use. We also will find that there's schools that have a certain grade level where they are at 30, 35 kids in, say, 4th grade. And someone wants to choice into that building. It would have worked in every other grade level except for that one class period. Now, if they bring a whole family in and they say, well, we wanted to get our 1st grader in, great. But we want to bring our 4th grader too. It's not an automatic in to overload that classroom. It wouldn't be fair to do that. So then we just have to notify the family we could only take one and not the other. So there are certain circumstances we have to work through to try and respect the fact that we don't want this to be a burden to the teachers who eventually, you know, have to pick up the load that we give them when we have choice students coming into their schools. So we do manage this in student services actively almost every day. We spend a lot of time on this, but just wanted to inform you and just see if you had any feeling one way or the other. The situation was well represented by Dr. McKee there, that Timpview is in a situation where we like to keep that open, but you well know there's plenty of feeling and context around why we are pumping the brake and saying, while we know that that's the concern that they'd have, we would want to manage that thoughtfully and not create more burden than we need to at a school that's already at a, you know, kind of a full allotment of students
Doug,
right
is
now.
there leniency to close it at the beginning of the year, but open it maybe a portion of the way through?
I think that what we have these different phases. We have open enrollment that runs essentially from December till March, and this is frankly, if you apply during that time frame and we've said that school is open, you all but get in because it can't be determined on class size at that point. Once we've gotten to March through that school year, it becomes late enrollment, and then we exercise a ton of judgment based on the active number that's there currently. So open enrollment really is, if someone really wants to get into a school, that's the time to apply, because the only criteria we have is, only criteria we'd have is that the building can't take any more kids, and we'd have to give them notice to say that's why we won't take your application. But it's March of the year, that's the next year, as well as during the whole school year. So we're in late enrollment for the 2021-22 year. And we'll be, Keith, just to your question, we'll be really aware of, in fact, almost each time we get an application, we'll call their registrar and secretary to say, give us an update as of now for the location this student is applying to enter, so that we are sensitive to the class load there, as well as the things like, I said, IEP, load for the special ed staff, et cetera, et cetera.
So you will take a transfer in the mid-year then?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we get applications every week.
Can I serve something up?
Always.
Well, this,
Do we have a choice?
I'm just bringing up something that Melanie's brought up in the past. My school, Canyon Crest, is always worried because they feel like they have too many open spots. I do want to mention that Wasatch has the most of all these schools. And I know that's something Melanie's been brought up, and so I'd like to bring it up.
The most open spots?
The most open spaces, the most open capacity. So my school's not the worst.
So are you saying that some schools are artificially inflated enrollment numbers
When you
because
look
of the
at
program?
the open spots and you divide that, like how many people could fit in, and you divide it by the number that they recommend. Wasatch was 13% open, and Canyon Crest was only 9%.
There you go.
So.
But they all get filled though, too.
So Melanie, just to try and recover the meeting for you, we're going to take the direction in student services to follow this direction of keeping all schools open, unless we kind of get a strong direction from you as to otherwise, is to with open enrollment beginning December 1st, for us to close any particular school. And I'll just pause there to see if there's any feedback or
So I
input.
hate to get into an argument with the principal, but I think that given the construction at Timpview, I think it's very hard to keep it open and look at least 220 kids over capacity.
Yes, and those hallways are so crowded as it is already in Timpview especially.
It becomes a safety issue.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that it's a very relevant point.
And we will have move-in
right?
still that we have to take them because they move in. So.
Right, it's a revolving door there for sure, and that's the part of school choice that you also know that the way you get into schools, you move in the neighborhood, right?
What are you doing?
Right?
Nate's freaking out over there.
I'm freaking out because this is the one thing that my constituents care about.
Right, exactly.
They're
so,
going to be mad at
right.
me.
So speak. So
You haven't
yeah.
said anything
So
on
speak
that,
up,
so you're
Nate.
good.
Well,
You have that tight fit.
I only hear about football. It's the only thing I ever hear about. And
I had my hand up to say almost exactly what Keith did. It doesn't make any sense to me that we would have put more kids, and Nate's constituents can email me, that we would put more kids in there than is safe. And especially, like, when there's non-construction, I still don't like it, but like, I'll talk about it, but when you have negative 220 seats and construction, and then we have kids walking to school, and there's safety concerns, and then we got, yeah, there's just, I personally, I feel like perhaps Timpview needs to go on hold for open enrollment. And email me at Nate B.
What this translates to when a school has more students than seats is just in all practicality, it just turns into larger class sizes, right? It's
Right,
not,
and those classrooms are already
they're
packed
not
as they
holding
are.
classroom in the hallways. They're not. I mean, again, we do have a relief from the seminary that takes release time. So these numbers do lower as a certain percentage of the school has enrollment off campus. So you could say, is there as many as 221 kids at any time over in the seminary building? I mean, there's all kinds of ways to wrestle with this.
221 kids at
The-
Days Market.
yeah, I know there's at least 30 kids drifting in the church parking lot.
To advocate again for the principal, and just again, because I told him that I would also just mention the way he's managed it in this past is if they identify that there's class sizes or class loads that they say our sophomore class or freshman class doesn't have room for any additional students, we've closed portions of their school for open enrollment, but then kept others open because they said, oh, they still have room in that English class for seniors or so on and so forth. So their registrar and principal has been actively managing this for us. But you're right, there's no question that this is a moment, that's why we're bringing it to you today, of stating for the upcoming entire years to say whether they're open or closed for open enrollment, or if it's something you'd let the principal and student services be able to manage the way they have in years gone back in the
Can
past.
we close it for the early period? And because you said once it becomes the late period, then you look at their applications more closely and will this fit in? So I'm thinking that if we're going to allow any enrollment into Timpview, it needs to be looked at more carefully, not just anybody who puts in there. Now, you just advertise that they should do it in the next 3 months, right?
Well, sure. And those that do this know that game anyway, so typically. But the only caution I'd mention with that is what's nice about getting these numbers by the deadline in February, actually it's the third Friday in February, is that then that number is fed through to our business department to HR, and they'll take those numbers of projected in people who will increase in their student body, then allocate FTE accordingly. There's a good chance that if we waited until March and then opened it up for anyone who wanted to come, those that would have applied from December to March will all just wait with bated breath for the opportunity for say that we can come, and then what wouldn't have happened is the school wouldn't have gotten ahead of this with FTE allocation for the whole hiring season for the next school year. It would be kind of an artificial bubble they'd be on, perhaps, if I'm explaining that right, to where the numbers seem like they didn't grow, but then suddenly if we opened it for late applications and began to insert students in there at high rates, it would be something we'd have to be really nimble with the faculty saying, we're ready to send you another teacher contract because we've had 35 kids choice in. We could certainly do it. I don't want to stand in the way of that happening.
Well, it's helpful to understand how that part works.
Right.
But
So that's
yeah.
the timing is there because it kind of manages into a process associated with us allocating FTEs to principals in the spring hiring season, right? But still, if they get a big enrollment through the summer months, and principals would know this, that every level, the supervisors advocate with HR to say, hey, it looks like your numbers have increased. Let's give you another FTE in June or July. Hire another teacher if it looks like your sizes are the point. Frankly, Timpview's at the spot where they'll just say candidly, they're out of teaching spaces, so they don't need any more teacher allotments. They've got a teacher in every classroom as it is.
There's no extra
right?
classrooms to go to.
They're utilizing that for probably support for classes, large classes like maybe teachers' assistants, people to help manage the parking lots, the hallways, additional staffing from that FTE that they might have saved.
Comment. It sounds like a logistical nightmare trying to manage kids who can come in where there's certain places they can go and certain places they can't. And how can we say to a kid, you can come to Timpview if you only take these certain classes, but we can't offer you these ones because there's no room. Like, that's a total equity issue, isn't it?
We just do it by grade level. So we'd say, does it look like the classes that are typically taken by a 10th grader, for instance? So this would be like probably the English classes where they most often look and say, and then in the complement of other classes they take, do we have room for a 10th grader to come in? Once they're in, we wouldn't say, sorry, you can only take 2 classes. We wouldn't do it that way.
Well,
It's a determination, and it's really clean at the elementary school because you can look and say, hey, that 5th grade class already has 35 kids, and you can make a decision. Secondary schools have to kind of look at some sort of a barometer in their master schedule and says, hey, we're out of seats in this grade level's such and such history class or English class or math class.
So
and that's what they'll say.
Just for time's sake,
yes.
we need to tell you to open or close Timpview tonight.
Well, the superintendent directs me as to how to do this. So again, whether it's not necessarily a voted item, I don't think.
It's
just a matter
not a
of
board. It's an administrative decision. They're just looking for direction.
It's direction and input you want to
the
give to the
superintendent gonna get in
superintendent, and he'll
trouble?
direct me to then how work with Todd and I to work with Timpview High School if you determine that you'd like to direct them to be closed. So.
We've closed other schools in the past. This isn't like we're picking on Timpview. This has happened before. This is just circumstantial. Sorry, Nate.
Two years ago.
Everybody has to take a turn.
2 years
right?
ago, just
Our
in
quarterback play depends on these transfers.
Rebecca, we did close both middle schools
Right,
a
that's
couple
just
years
like a
ago
couple years
because
ago,
of the
both
size
middle schools
issues
were
we had at
closed.
Centennial and Dixon. For
Right.
one school year, they were closed for
This
open
isn't
enrollment.
unusual. This isn't a case of trying to, put a
We don't have any
wrench
copies
in
in the
someone's
pipeline.
athletics.
We don't have a. We need someone from Kahuku who can come in, play right away.
That's a commute from Kahuku
Yes.
to Timpview.
They're empty. It's in the district.
This bubble of larger enrollment that was at the middle school, frankly, is in the high schools now. So you'll see both of the
Right.
high schools have a little bit of a bump in their enrollment
It's just a
because
natural
there's a larger
rate.
grade level group that's going through that are currently in the 9th and the 10th grade or 8th and 9th grade right now.
Yeah. Does anybody else feel uncomfortable with all this joking that's happening? A little
Sorry.
bit, like we're gonna get raised over
I'll
the
just,
post,
Melanie,
like-
I'll give you back the meeting.
I
and
will.
If you want to give a direction to the
Nate B. at
superintendent.
provo.edu. So, okay, moving on.
So do you understand our recommendation, Keith?
I think I do,
All except for
yeah,
Nate.
but don't
Okay.
expect me to explain it right now.
Okay. All right, agenda reviews. I understand that nothing's come up on here for board docs, and I have that understanding from you, Terry. What I want to do with agenda reviews, this is something that has not happened while I have been on the board, but I understand that this was something that happened prior to me being on the board. We would like to bring it back, so once the board leadership sets the agenda, Keith will bring in the rest of the board on separate times, because we can only have 3 people in a board meeting, to explain what's on the agenda, to give you some feedback prior to the meeting.
So that there are no surprises.
No
as to what
surprises.
this means.
Agenda reviews are very common in other states. They're not very common here in Utah. And it's a system that I tried to bring in several years ago, but it took a while to try to get everybody acclimated to it. We thought we'd try it again. Especially when there's maybe some challenges with intra-board communication or intra-board / superintendent communication.
So
That's
how
good.
does this also accomplish the open meetings law? So-
We're only gathering in
So-
maximum of 3 at a time.
No, open meetings law has a deadline. You have to publish everything by
Oh.
So
what
this
time?
would be done before the
Before we
24 hours.
post it.
Okay.
Yeah.
So when would this happen? What's the
So if we
plan?
build an agenda on Tuesday or Wednesday, the week before the board meeting, then it would happen probably Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday before, or Monday before the board meeting.
And if you can make it, great. If you can't, we understand things come up that you may not be able to make it. And like this week, I was out of town all last week, so I wasn't able to meet with Rebecca earlier in the week to do the agenda. We had to do it yesterday. So we would normally be earlier to form the agenda.
I attended a few of these when I first came on the board before they kind of fizzled out, and they're super helpful for just knowing what to expect and knowing what's coming up. Because you can always read what's in the attached documents, but sometimes you still need some context, sometimes you still need some explanation, sometimes you still may have some questions ahead of time. And so it was very helpful for me to attend when I first came on board. I think they would be great to bring back personally as well.
I'll just try.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
like
and
I
try
said,
and
this
see
is
if
something
everybody
I've
else
never
thinks it's-
seen happen, so I'd like to see it happen. Is there any questions or comments about that?
I think formal communication is easier to improve than informal communication. And I think that the board got towards the end of lots of people's terms, and so informal communication sort of became the rule of the day. And then that informal communication breaks down really easily, and so if we want to improve board communication, we have to have a way to formalize it first, and then we can make systemic improvements in it. So I think this is a good step.
I would appreciate it. I've been surprised far too many times, so I would appreciate it.
Okay. So what we'll do is, when we have set the agenda, then Keith will let you guys know when he's available, give you a couple of times. And
Keith, otherwise known as Bonnie.
Well, and that's how I remember it going. I just got an email that said if you want to come to an agenda review, there's Friday at 2, Friday at 3, or like Thursday at 4. Pick one. Come if you can. And that's how it went. And then I would show up at one of the times. You did have to kind of RSVP your time, so we made sure not to get too many together at once. But then you just RSVP your time and show up with any questions you may have or go over things. And it's good for any kind of preparation for meetings for sure.
so plan on that for the December board meeting.
And I think it also helped, I mean, the agenda is our agenda. It should feel like our agenda, not just leadership, and it's our agenda.
Yeah.
And I think this helps getting it that way.
Do you need more Zoom meetings because you travel too much?
Yeah.
Again,
Any one
like
of
I
those
said,
could
our
be-
countries.
You can zoom
Yeah.
into any one of those, right?
Probably could
Anyone
zoom
can
in,
zoom in.
or
Or I just won't come.
Yeah, exactly. But I was going to say, these are optional.
Yeah.
They're not
Yeah.
something that you have to feel like it's another meeting you have to attend.
But if
you
we
would
have the
like
Zoom
to-
option, that would be awesome, because, yeah, it would just be awesome if I have that option as well.
Yeah.
Especially if I can see,
Thank you.
will we have the option to see the agenda so we can see if there's any questions that we have?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll get a copy of the agenda,
And then
we'll
send
just
the
go
times.
right through it.
Okay.
It'll probably just be on board docs.
And in the past, I can remember a couple times where somebody just opened up their phone and went, "You're calling it," and I mean, so people
Yeah.
did them in their car, and
So we'll find ways to accommodate you if needed.
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Consent calendar. Are there any questions on that?
I had one question. I don't really know who's answering them today.
Well,
Derek?
was it something that you emailed Derek prior?
No, because I didn't get to read it till
Okay, well, hopefully Devin can answer.
I will do
for you.
my best.
So where is the maintenance projects and building improvement projects page? It's not in there.
The page of, that is just
On
an
the
oversight
executive
thing.
summary, it's not there. I compared it to last month's report, and it's not on October's report.
And that was just an oversight in his, when he compiled all the papers, we can get that, I can get it to Bonnie and.
Make sure it's added. Okay.
Is that your only question?
Yes.
Okay. All right, upcoming Google Calendar items. We have Thanksgiving break coming up on November 25th. We then have study sessions on December 14th, and then Christmas break from December 20th through the 31st. We'll be back in school on January 3rd. And then we have USBA conference in person. I'm so happy about this today. I hope everybody has gotten their information to Bonnie that is needed. Bonnie, do you need any information?
No, I just need those forms. I think I have.
Ah.
But I don't need them until before Christmas break. So
Okay.
you've got time, just
Okay.
don't forget, and I'll try to keep reminding you.
Yes, thank you for your reminders. We love you for those. So.
And Kenny, if I could add, the study session on the 14th will likely include an executive session to discuss real estate.
So, yep. All right, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Okay, we'll go into the business meeting.
Did I say study session? I meant executive session.
No,
You
you
said
said
executive.
executive.
So what's your